The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charmaine Lang, and I am a scholar activist and a freelance writer based in North Carolina. I thank you all for attending our panel today. We make revolution irresistible, Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer community building. And today we're going to be talking about the long tradition of Black, Indigenous, and people of color queer activism and coalition building amid the transgenerational arc of violence, discrimination, and trauma. And to introduce the panel, I want to share with you all a quote that inspired the title. So in a 1982 interview with Kay Bennett, Toni Cade Bambara, a Black woman, activist, writer, mother, said, "As a cultural worker who belongs to an oppressed people, my job is to make revolution irresistible. One of the ways I attempt to do that is by celebrating those victories within the Black community. And I think the mere fact that we're still breathing is a cause for celebration." And so today we have an esteemed panelists that will talk about some of the ways in which they pursue community building in their community. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and have them all introduce themselves as well. Sandra, would you like to begin?
Sure, my name is Tamara Zapata. I am the bilingual therapist and educator at the Milwaukee LGBT Community Center.
Thank you. Ryan, would you like to go next?
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Young. I'm a case manager with Youth Shelters and Family Services, but I'm also an artist. I work a lot with the queer, Indigenous, and Two-Spirit community.
Thank you. Carrie?
Hi, my name is Carrie Hawks, pronounced they, them, theirs. I'm a artist, filmmaker, designer, and activist based out of Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you. Beyonce? You're muted.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dante. My he, him, his. I wear many hats, but my title is an Inclusion and Equity Coordinator for Diversity and Resilience in Milwaukee, and also a queer and trans birth worker or doula.
Right. Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. All right, let's jump right into questions. And for folks who are viewing the panel today, if you all have questions, you can go ahead and add them and we will get to them as we're able. All right, so what does it mean to have queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, people of color only spaces? And anyone can take that question.
I could start a little bit. I have that. I'm part of a sangha. I'm kind of Buddhist sometimes, and I'm part of a BIPOC sangha. And within that group, it just means we come together to meditate and talk about racial healing. It's kind of like being able to let my guard down a little bit and being with people who have a better understanding or may have a personal understanding of what I'm talking about. And it feels just like a kinder space where I'm not as worried about, you know, how someone's going to take my feelings, how someone's going to take my anger, that type of thing. Like, not to say it can't happen, but I just like, it's very restorative and it feels just like very necessary, especially in these times.
I think I would like to piggyback off that. I think whiteness is tight and rigid and constricting and always present. And so the moment you get spaces where they're like, no, it's just us, or it's just kin, or it's just family that looks like you, that experience similar things, or at least know what you're talking about. It's groundbreaking. Like the moment you find that space, it feels like a whole new world is possible. Without whiteness, right? Without white gaze, so inherently without oppression work, right? Without at least white supremacy being in the room, which is subconsciously controlling and controls us when white folks are not even in our spaces, right? And you get to undo that with the people near you in those spaces.
I also think it's like particularly important, especially in like academia. You know, a lot of the classes that I've taken, especially like in UW Madison and stuff like that, there's a lot of erasure of like even just like talking about like the genocide and the ways that colonization impacted our communities. And so we're, you know, those spaces kind of allow us to, you know, vent to each other about the ways that we already see that we're not being seen in academia or even in these discussions. And then it just kind of um, allows us to kind of vent and unwind in order to, you know, make it through those next days.
I think for me, spaces where it's only BIPOC folks is very healing, where we can just kind of take off the guard and come together and talk about experiences that maybe white folks just cannot relate to because that's not an experience that they've dealt with or that they've experienced themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question. But if at any time you all have other questions that you want to ask to panelists or to myself, like go ahead and throw it out there. Okay, this isn't a rigid set of questions that I have, just more of a guiding post. What is the importance of having these spaces for community building and maintaining activism?
I think that we just need a space to dream, right? And I don't think that we can ever do that with whiteness being in the space, with white supremacy being in the space, or people that can't relate in those ways. So on top of it being groundbreaking, it's necessary, like Carrie said, like it's something that is like that has been intentionally stripped away also, is to like whole community with people that look like us, right? Because you find power in shared experience. You find power in sharing healing stuff, sharing trauma, sharing cooking recipes, sharing like jokes, right? Like you find healing in those, and you also find revolutionary work and revolutionary people that you wouldn't have access to if we indoctrinated us into like white systems or white supremacy led organizations or like groups, even when it could be like of similar identities, right? Where like they put you in a room of other trans people or other queer people, and it feels different because white trans people are different from black trans people or are different from Asian trans people. So it's a barrier, and I hope I'm answering the question. So yeah.
Absolutely. And something that I thought about while you were talking, or something that it made me think about, is even now during COVID, you know, a lot of community building, relationship building is happening virtually. And so once the news, the very recent news, I think just within like 2 or 3 hours of Breonna Taylor hit, you know, my friends and I, all folks of color, you know, we have a Slack channel, and we utilized it. We, you know, used it to talk about the type of, you know, grief and grieving that we're feeling right now, the just where we are individually, but also collectively in this moment. And then also, you know, we use those spaces to then, that Slack space to then, you know, organize a virtual Zoom call or what have you, until we can physically be in the same space. So like I totally feel you. Like it's something that's very healing and therapeutic and sacred about being able to be among other folks of color who get it, who you don't have to explain your grief to, you know, you don't have to explain your tears to, like you can just be with them. Did anyone else want to add to that question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say also it's a place to allow vulnerability, because I think especially if you're doing a lot of activism work and there's a lot of anger involved in that, there's a lot of fighting, and to have to continue to fight and be angry within all your spaces is so draining, and it's just really important to have a space where you can be vulnerable and not worry all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of particularly interesting because, like, for social media, like your profile, it's your community that makes up what you're seeing on, like, what gets posted and things like that. But then you notice that we need additional spaces in addition to those spaces. So, like, there's a lot of different Two-Spirit organizations and, like, queer indigenous, like, Facebook groups that pop up that kind of just help kind of create even a safer space to have those discussions, especially not even like it expands beyond just like current events too. Like you're able to kind of learn about history, language, and things that you might be getting denied from in cultural spaces because either the person teaching it is homophobic or transphobic, or that they have their own biases that are already limiting you from accessing your cultural spaces.
Yeah, I think for me, it's very important, and it's a form of self-care to spend time with other folks of color, because that is the only space where I can, like somebody said, like be vulnerable and also have those conversations about how rigid our systems are, right? Like even if it comes to being on time and having that be a stressor, when we're in community, that's not what's important. What's important is building each other up and hearing about how you're doing, and not necessarily about, well, we have an hour and that's all we have, right? And we have to get going, or we have an agenda and we have to be done with it soon. So I think that is where I find a lot of healing for myself.
How would you all define irresistibility within activism movement? Or put another way, like how are you all making revolution irresistible?
I think I'm trying to do that by engaging practices that my ancestors have used. So I've been trying to learn a lot about kind of like herbs and home remedies, things that will help me calm down. I'm trying to have conversations with other folks who are looking for that as well. So I think, embracing my body the way it is and accepting it the way it is, and not worrying about, well, I'm not thin yet, I'm not skinny, so therefore I'm not worthy, right? Like having those hard conversations and seeing my body as it is, and using that maybe as an example of how other people can feel better about who they are.
I do joy work. We start with joy. We laugh, we joke, we break professionalism because it's not real. We I think like the works there's too much trauma. There's too much trauma for us to always be soaking in it. Which isn't to say that like that isn't liberation work too, because it is, right? Like we are here to also honor whatever way that we are showing up. But also sprinkling in some funny shit, like right, sprinkling in some cuss words, like sprinkling in things that like break you from this rigid narrative that is like gatekeeping, that is white gaze, that is rooted in white supremacy, that is rooted in like the stripping of joy, right? So like we bring it back full force. Like we start with a joke, or we're like, my day was trash, and right, because like honesty also is something we gatekeep because it's not seen as something that's supposed to be there. And so we try to eliminate that, all of it. And also, I don't serve white folks. That's not my joy work. I'm not serving white people. White people can serve white people, right? Which is also a part of my self-care, is being like, not only will I gatekeep who I'm serving, I want you to, it's going to be apparent, right? Because the people that I serve have also been the people that have been underserved, and undervalued and stripped of joy. And so a part of like bringing back activism work that makes it like irresistible, it's irresistible for my people. I absolutely want white folks to be like, maybe that's not for me. Absolutely second guess if we're supposed to be in this space with each other, right? Because that's joy work for me. You're not supposed to be here. Like, that's it.
I think to build on what has been shared, yeah, also humor is so important. I think like we can't be like everything's horrible all the time. Like I also do stand-up comedy. There are some brilliant memes out there that just get my entire life and break things down, like gender reveal party, like all that bullshit. Like make fun of it, because then it starts to lose its power in some way. And also, you need to rejuvenate. I need to sleep. I need to look good, because when I look good, I feel good. I don't want to be like constantly stressed out and irritated and like, I don't have time for me. And I'm looking good in the ways that I want to look good, not in the ways that somebody else tells me like this looking good looks like, whatever. But yeah, I think bringing the joy and the humor, and when people ask me how I'm doing, to be like, yeah, I'm not doing good, or like, this is why. And if you can't have that conversation, then we don't need to have the conversation.
I love that. I love that. Body positivity, self-love, body love, humor, vulnerability, all of it. I'm here for it. I love also like classifying it as joy work as well. All right, speaking for yourselves or your organization, what are the unique challenges of creating queer, trans, BIPOC spaces in today's climate? And also, what are the joys?
Can you repeat that question one more time, please?
Absolutely, yes. So speaking for yourselves or your organization, what are the unique challenges of creating queer, trans, BIPOC spaces in today's climate, and what are the joys?
I guess I would say I think it's really important to have like the representation, especially like in classrooms, like incorporating talking about two-spirit identity or queer, indigenous like history, in the mainstream, like learning about history. Sorry, I like totally just lost my train of thought as but I think just the hard part about it is that a lot of the time, especially in academia, like the work is put on us to create those spaces or to create those classrooms when we're also like in college trying to get a degree, and that's like where it can be hard, but it's still joyful because like you feel like you can at least sign off on what is being brought into that curriculum or how it's being built or how at least that it's heading in a right direction. But I think sometimes it can go too far to where because like I think because I used to attend the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's where I graduated from. They did a focus on queer indigenous identity and two-spirit. So they had a class that was dedicated to that, but that was one semester. Where does that conversation come after that, or what are you doing to make sure that whatever is being taught in that classroom gets integrated into the other classes that are being offered, so that way you don't have to specifically sign up for a class to learn about queer indigenous history. Like it should just be incorporated throughout the entire curriculum.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add to that, Ryan, sorry. Academia, particularly departments that grew out of social justice movement, so Indigenous studies, Latina studies, Black studies, women and gender studies, I really need them to do a better job of protecting their students from doing so much activist work within the organization, or within the department and on campus, because one, we're not getting paid for that work often. And two, that work isn't counted towards our degrees, so a lot of times we're doing emotional free labor for our departments, which is, again, just another tool of white supremacy, where we're doing this work, we're doing this emotional, physical, mental, emotional labor, and we are not getting compensated for it in any ways, which, isn't joy work, right? And it creates so many challenges for ourselves, especially as we're trying to move throughout and really move through our programs to complete it. Did anyone else want to add anything? No, I just jumped in.
I did. And I think one of the challenges is when we start, I think that people look at queer folks as this monolithical one dimension thing. And then they're like, well, we accept queer folks, right? Not acknowledging intersections, not acknowledging that like that Black queer person is not the same Black queer person, right? Like we are not the same people. And I think that happens in academia. I think that happens in these nonprofits and for-profits, right? It's like they have this one idea of what queer looks like and try to serve that one idea and leave everything else, whether it be intentional or not, on the wayside because they don't know how to access it, or because it wasn't even a conversation that there'd be different, right? Different types of queerness.
Oh, hopefully she'll come back. But I think also to add, Yonte, on what you were just saying, like that's another reason to have these BIPOC spaces, because if then we all go around thinking there's one way to be Black, queer, or two-spirit, or whatever you are, then when you meet with other people, you realize all the different ways to be within your identity. And I think that's just enriching because we all contain so much. Yeah, oh, cool, came back.
All right, did anyone else want to add? I know I lost it there for a second. I got lost for a second.
I just wanted to add, one of the challenges that I've encountered in bringing in Latinx folks into the queer conversation has been there's a lack of language in Spanish that can help Spanish-speaking individuals relate to what queerness is. And we're still very much afraid to have conversations about intersectionality and have conversations about anti-Blackness within our same community. We're having issues talking just about being queer and being accepting in all aspects of our lives, and not just like, no, I accept you and I love you, but let's never talk about this again kind of deal, because that happens a lot with the people that I see coming in and having those conversations. So there's a lot of challenges in just making language accessible to folks who speak Spanish, and of course other languages as well. But obviously I work closer with the Latinx community who are Spanish speaking. So I think there's challenges in language and being accessible. But part of the joy of it is that they know that there's a space for them as well, right? Like if they want to come in and have a conversation about, I think my son is gay, how do I support them? Let's have that conversation, right? In Spanish, let's talk about what our culture says about, what you're going through and how you're going to have to be an advocate for your own child at home when those homophobic or transphobic remarks come up with family members, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Cute dog alert.
All right. What is the role or the importance of spiritual, mental, and/or emotional health within communities and activism itself?
I'd just say it's paramount. Like if even in activist spaces where we all are maybe aligning very much on what our goals are politically, how we treat one another really also needs to align with like the care we want to bring into the world. I don't know who said it, but somebody said care is the antidote to violence. And just maintaining that and upholding that when we're working with one another, when we're in these spaces, when we're working in other spaces, because a lot of this work is very taxing, very exhausting, very damaging, and there's a lot of trauma that we as people have gone through generations and also within our individual lives, and that shows up especially when we're stressed. So I think it's just really important to try and maintain care and know when conflict comes up to talk about it, so we're not like just rebuilding these structures and hierarchies, because stuff falls apart all the time. But I think the harder thing is to like say, okay, so this didn't work. Like, how can we talk about it? How can we work through it and with it?
Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
It's totally okay. What is the role or the importance of spiritual, mental, and/or emotional health within communities and activism itself?
That's all of it, right? Like it's built on that. Our emotional capacities brought us here when we noticed harm, right? So we have to sustain emotional and spiritual wellness throughout all of it, and we haven't. And I think that when we talk about activist spaces, especially the ones in Milwaukee, we we want to be sustaining all of these things and sustaining what it means to be doing joy work, sustaining what it means to be doing work that feels good. But we haven't actually imagined it, right? Like we haven't given ourselves, it hasn't been given to us access to a world where care work is the center of revolutionary work, or care work is the center of abolition work, or care work is the center of reform, or whatever the hell the work is, right? Like we are always being rooted back to care work, but we haven't gotten there. And I think when the same as when Carrie brought up is like we the way we speak to each other in activist spaces is not a representation of the world we want to build. It isn't. It isn't. Because there have been numerous times where we, as activists, are fighting over each other to be in the same space, to get our words heard, to be validated and felt, when we could just take a second, right? Or we could hold each other accountable. And accountability, right? Like that is a part of emotional learning. That is a part of breaking down systems. Is being able to hold our communities accountable for not nurturing the work that we are trying to sustain and create. Holding ourselves accountable for not being centered in care work, for not being centered in nurture work, and in turn upholding patriarchy, or upholding all the things that have been oppressing us in the forefront, because we haven't reimagined. Shout out to read that word reimagine. Adrienne Marie Brown taught me that, and ever since I've been like, period, we gotta reimagine everything. Everything must go, but we gotta dream first. So yeah.
Yeah, I think if those weren't the goals of our work, like we would just be existing in the spaces as they are now. Like if we weren't trying to focus on, making sure that we had spiritual health and mental health and emotional health, like we wouldn't have tried to create these spaces.
I want us to take just maybe a couple minutes and talk about like what does it look like, what does it entail to do that care work, that nurture work, that joy work, and really to reimagine what our worlds could look like, what we want them to look like, and then also like reimagining or re-envisioning what excuse me, what it would mean for us to treat each other with care, the care and respect and accountability that you all have mentioned.
I think for me, it would look like collaboration and us being able to like pick up the phone or text someone and say, hey, I need this today, right? I need help finding this. I think it has a lot to do with leaning on each other and finding ways of like lifting each other's work up as well, right? So I think it encompasses a lot of things. It encompasses a lot of work, but also finding that joy, like Janta was saying, in that work and working with it. So there's a lot. There's a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I was on a jury panel for an art fellowship recently, and we had started the meeting just like we started, and then someone was like, wait, we don't even know who each other is. Let's introduce each other. And then someone shared like that their organization had to lay off a lot of people during the pandemic, and like just being able to bring in, not just show up to me and be like, yeah, I'm ready to work, but like what was happening for you during that day, during that week, like having a check-in. And I'm not a fan of gigantically long check-ins, but like, you know, a time check-in just so you can know where people are at during that day, and you don't have to pretend like everything's fine, or if it is, that's good, but like knowing that other people maybe aren't at 100% right now, and I'm not at 100% during any of this right now. So I think allowing for that and just making room for that to be known.
Yeah, like when I was living in Madison, I lived in the Audre Lorde co-op. It was a 15-person co-op, and so I think, a lot of the that I loved most about it was that, the meals were always community based, so we were always eating together. A lot of the, we would always check in every meal. We assign chores and just like, like it was more accountability, like self accountability. Just making sure that we were creating space for each other, and that if someone didn't have, the ability to do, the things that they agreed to that week, like there wasn't a consequence, or, there wasn't some reason, like it was more understanding, and, just kind of coexisting together in a space I thought was just really, I think really good for my mental health, especially because we were like, the co-op was like just off of like the whole like Langdon, so it's just off Frat Row, so you're seeing a lot of people partying and, wrecking stuff and just kind of going crazy, and um, being able to kind of have a space where, that stuff didn't happen, or, that we were able to, spend the weekends like just reading and chilling in the common spaces and chatting with each other, like to have a community that feels more like home is kind of, the goal that I want to see for myself.
Can you repeat the question? Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. So I was just asking for us to indulge each other a little bit and engage in a bit of, reimagining, whether it's, our activist work, our lives, like whatever it may be, reimagining the worlds that we want to live in. Like, what are some of the things that you all have been dreaming about? Is really just what I wanted to hear a bit of.
I've actually been reimagining not being an activist. I've been reimagining what it means to not be doing this work, right? For all of our jobs to be like, y'all ain't gotta do that work no more. Everybody's liberated, right? And I had a hard time, right? I was like, my job goes away. Everything I know and do is around liberation work. I eat, sleep, breathe, and piss liberation work. How could you, right? But isn't that reimagining? Like, if we're gonna actually reimagine, our roles aren't roles anymore. We ain't gotta work no 9 to 5. There's no 40-hour weeks. You do what you want. You do what you love. That it sustains you and your people and your communities. And I've also been like reimagining what it means to just be angry, right? So for me, my community looks like a bunch of angry motherfuckers in one space and being like, we are pissed. This sucks, right? And being like, yes, and you are allowed to show up and feel that way. Because we're censoring anger, we're censoring sadness to fit agendas and movements, which is okay, great, and we are still gatekeeping. So if we're gonna reimagine, to me, to reimagine a new world, we don't have that. We are allowing anger, we are allowing men to cry, we are allowing trans people to exist in the bodies they want to exist in without it being called anything. There are no labels to nothing. And if there are labels, those are self-placed, right? Those are identified by that person, and we value and love and hold that, right? Um, I also think when I reimagine, I'm like, Black women. Black women are somewhere thriving, probably getting their own little spot space in the world where they just be like, I didn't do all this work for you motherfuckers, and I just need a space for other Black women, right? So so it's that and young people. So my world looks Black and young and queer and trans. And we ain't working no 9 to 5s. Who told people to do that? Like, that is so ghetto, like oppressive, just ridiculous. So yeah.
Absolutely. One question that I really like that's folks will pre-pandemic would often ask as an icebreaker is what will your job be post-revolution, right? Because we know that the revolution is coming. We know that liberation is coming. This is why we're doing this work, right? To put ourselves out of a job, but more importantly, to make to have justice be a reality for every person. So I'll just ask that question as well. And I do have a few other questions. And again, like if you all have any questions you want to pose, please, share them. But what is your job going to be post-revolution?
I'm gonna be a witch. I'm going to do work that has to do with, light work, and it's going to be doing tarot, and it's going to be me learning more about, the stars and the universe and how everything connects and how everything has to do with each other, right? Like connectivity, that's what we're doing. And I believe in it, and I believe that it matters and it has a space to exist. And that is my spiritual practice, and that's what I would do.
I second that. I also am going to be a witch. I'm trying right now. I'm also going to be a comedian witch. Not necessarily at the same time, but maybe. I do film because I love doing film. It's not my full-time day job. At some point, maybe it will be when I'm living in a place where I need less economic resources. But I'm trying to do both right now because I don't want to be like, after the big deal happens, then I can. No, I'm going to enjoy it while the big deal is still happening.
Carrie, when you were like, I can't do it at the same time, I'm like, so you better crack some jokes into the spirit world. They need it too. Like, just crack some jokes. Everybody think it's all serious. No, the guys need funny too. I think that I know that I would be a farmer. I would be somewhere creating something, right? And also feeding people food. I don't know how to cook. I'm not a cook, but I would be cooking folks. I would be cooking for folks and holding space and teaching young people. I love kids, like kids. That would be my job.
I think I would be just. I think like Carrie said, I do a lot of photography and it never once felt like a job. So I think just continuing to do documentation and representation and filling social media up with all the members of my community and making sure that everyone's being seen.
Yes, I love all of that. I would say I would definitely be an interior decorator. Like that would be my job once after the revolution is here. I'm just going to be decorating people's homes, beautifying them. All right, so in the film Our Dance of Revolution, the activists ask themselves if they are a Black group in the queer community or a queer group in the Black community, deciding that they are the latter, that they are a queer group in the Black community. How does your work or your organization engage these questions of space and identity? And I'll repeat the question. In the film Our Dance of Revolution, the activists ask themselves if they are a Black group in the queer community or a queer community in the Black community, and deciding for themselves that they are the latter, that they are a queer group in the Black community. How does your work or organization engage these questions of space and identity?
I would say so. I think I actually don't know if my film's already played or not, but I have a film in the festival. It's called Black Enough. It is about a queer oddball seeking acceptance from their Black peers despite a serious lack of hip hop knowledge. So it's about me and a lot of people like me, and it's like trying to find my place within the Black community because I'm not concerned about fitting in another like a white one. And then I'm also working on a film now about 3 BIPOC people and their experiences with self-injury. So I think just starting everything and maintaining everything, thinking about it from Black perspective or a BIPOC perspective, like that's where our framework is. Those are the people I'm trying to reach. Other people can get something from it too. That's wonderful, but that's not my goal. And just continuously like thinking about identity, what is important to my identity and what I want to hold on to, what I want to let go of, and not letting someone else tell me either of those. So that's really important to me in my work.
I hated that. I hate that we have to have a dichotomy or that we have to choose. That is unfair. It's unfair and isn't justice work. Like white cis het men don't have to choose between white cis hetness, right? Like, and when we see it every day of like having to choose something, like Black women, they have to be either a Black person first or a woman first, or a trans person who is also Black has to be a trans person or a Black person first. It's unfair to, first of all, create a binary that shouldn't even exist, and then force people to be like, you have to choose to show up as harder for one. We don't exist like that as people. That's not intersectional, and you are creating harm because Black people have and do, and historically will probably continue until we break, right? We'll tell you, oh, you're not Black then if you're queer, or we're not fighting for you when we talk about Black lives. And it is because of that where we are devalued as people, or our humanity is taken away, or dignity is taken away, because we are not acknowledging the whole person that shows up. And Diverse and Resilient does a great job of being intersectional. It doesn't have a choice, one, because if you're going to serve our community, you're serving all of us. And yeah, it feels unfair. It feels like we're racing our intersections to be the first, right? Like it feels like we have to always choose in these bodies. And that is racist, it's transphobic, it's homophobic, like it's all intertwined together.
I think I've been very lucky in my organization to have the support of my supervisor to start things that are community based, right? So before the pandemic and when we could see each other in person, we would have dinner together. And that was something, right? Like it wasn't just showing up to group, it was about creating community with folks that maybe you didn't know before, you've never met before. So having dinner, having meals together, breaking bread, like that's a concept that we have and that we use. And also focusing a lot of virtual events around healing and different healing practices from different groups and what that looks like. So I'm glad that I can have those conversations at work, but I know that that's not necessarily something that happens everywhere or for everyone.
I think too, one of those questions are posed, like how you asked the question, Charmaine, that it implies that part that queerness doesn't exist in that community, or that blackness doesn't exist in the queer community. Like it's just othering it. And so a lot of the work that I do, especially around like two-spirit identity, it's kind of talking about how, especially like language reclamation and looking at the different tribal languages that identified multiple gender identities, it shows that, that there was always rooted in indigenous culture, that there was never like a separate queer community from indigenous identity, that, historically that these communities, grew together, coexisted together, and and for me, like that's why I identify as two spirit, because it doesn't put like one identity over the other. It encompasses them all together because I don't navigate this world as one or the other. Like those all of those coexisting together is what builds your perceptions of how you navigate the world.
Thank you all. All right, so Angela Roberts, one of the community activists featured in the film, stated, as Black people who are organizing, as queer people who are organizing, we need an ethic of self-care as part of the revolution, because ultimately the systems that we seek to correct when we don't tend to our self-care. And so I wanted to ask, what does an ethic of self-care look like for you all? And I'll repeat the question. So again, Angela Roberts, one of the community activists featured in the film, Our Dance of Revolution, stated, as Black people who are organizing, as queer people who are organizing, we need an ethic of self-care as part of the revolution. And this is something that we've talked about with care work and nurture work. So an ethic of self-care as part of the revolution, because ultimately the systems that we seek to correct when we don't tend to our self-care. And again, what does an ethic of self-care look like for you all?
I think self-care for me looks a lot like being off the clock and not talking about work and not bringing things home, especially on weekends. There's nothing I'm going to be able to accomplish during the weekend. It has, like it has its time and place. So just kind of trying to work really hard at leaving things back when they are not anything that I can work on or I can serve, right? And it's not serving myself either. It also looks like giving myself a break when things are not getting accomplished as fast as I think my productivity is expected. Not by anybody in particular, like there's just rules that I made up in my head about how I always have to be productive. Otherwise, like I'm not worthy of having a job and getting paid, right? So working against those concepts that I have also kind of like put on myself and those stressors that I put on myself. So knowing that sometimes all I need is just a nap and pick it up tomorrow because there's nothing else that I'm going to accomplish. So giving myself a break and not stressing more than I have to. I've also had to start teaching myself to distress my shoulders. Like every once in a while, I'm just like, oh, yeah, I don't need to be this tense. Like I can just calm down. So noticing my body and what it's doing when it's stressed out. So it's a whole bunch of different things, I guess.
I would say I have a few rules. One rule is no racial trauma before bed. So if I'm going to be reading a story or watch I'm like, no, it's about an hour before bed. I'm not going to carry that into my dream world. Like I need something to decompress. I can journal. Every night I burn some incense that makes me feel like the smells make me feel calm. I turn off the screens, hopefully an hour, at least a half hour before I go to bed. I start to just like recenter myself. And then when I'm too busy, trying to like at least have one breath. If I can't meditate between, just like, And I had a therapist she was really good because I, by nature and by heredity, I'm a workaholic. And she'd always be like, but Carrie, ask yourself, does it need to be done right now? And I'm like, oh, maybe not. Or like if I'm having so much trouble getting it done right now, maybe that's my body also telling me like this is not going to be done right now. And that's just going to be okay.
I am really bad at self-care. And this question always comes up, and you think that I would learn how to get self-care by the time the next question comes. I don't. I never. I don't. I just and a part of that is like I prioritize like the work above myself, and I know that I have to unlearn this. And so I think a lot of my self-care is reminding myself that I need to be doing self-care. or going outside, totally being like, I can't talk right now. I'm just gonna go outside, or running around with my dogs who are very annoying, who are so irritating, but who are also being like, let me love on you. Let's do stuff. Let's go outside. And reminding myself that all the living creatures in this space need self-care. All the living creatures in this space need care, including myself. So I really just be guilt tripping myself and be like, look who went outside, you and your dogs. So
It's been kind of interesting because my self care is kind of flipped. Like pre-pandemic, it was a lot of isolation and like Netflix and stuff, and now because I feel because like I'm out in Santa Fe, all my family lives back in Wisconsin. So it can feel very lonely out here, even though there are friends. So I've done a lot more like Zoom calls and meeting, like calling my family at home a lot, or I have a friend that I check in with. So when I get home from work, like if I'm super tense from how stressful the day was, like I have a friend that I at least try to check in with every day, and we do that mutually for each other to kind of talk through the stresses. And it's kind of interesting because we'll even be like, um, I need to vent, but I don't want advice, or like something where like at least you're establishing before the conversation's had, like that whether you want help or not, or whether you just need it like 10 minutes to just vent and get everything off your chest. So that's been kind of been being more social has been kind of my self care. I think, especially just with the lack of being able to do a lot of stuff right now, even in your own communities, or being able to even just go to the movie theater. Like there's a lot of stuff that we are still kind of adapting to and trying to navigate.
Yes, I love all the things that you all shared. Self-care, I think, is definitely sometimes a struggle for activists who are so used to giving of themselves all the time. Lately, part of my ethic of self-care definitely includes community accountability and flexibility. Flexibility, like it's really important for me to have flexible self-care practices, because what I may need on Tuesday might not be the same thing that I need later on Tuesday, or the next day, or what have you. But lately, one of my self-care practices has been napping. And I don't know if y'all heard of the nap ministry, but it changed my life. Just that reminder, that affirmation that naps are revolutionary, and yes, we all can take naps, when and how we're able to, and it's a beautiful thing. Like rest, it has to be part of our revolutionary work. All right, so in wrapping up, I want to know, is there anything you wanted to ask or mention before we run out of time? No. All right. So then,
Yeah.
yes.
I want to know what's a song that's really like gets you in a good mood.
Currently, I'm obsessed with Maluma's Hawaii. It's just happy and dancey, and I like it.
I'm gonna say Pharrell's Happy. It's just something about the beat and all of that. Like it always just gets me up, So yeah, that song. And anything from Frankie Beverly and Maze. Love it.
I had to check in with a friend and like, y'all, what do we do? Like, what's the song? WAP. That came out. I don't care what nobody says. That slaps. I was like, period. And also, this is so problematic, but I love Hamilton so much. Anything from Hamilton, I will go off. It's like a secret. So I be sitting like, your Doja, she writes me a letter every day. So yeah.
Bad Bunny is the current love right now. So.
Did you say Bad Bunny? Okay.
Bad Bunny, yeah. I've been listening to Burner Boy, Wonderful. It's just the music video also cute. Also people of all genders dancing all the parts, not segregated. So yeah, I'm liking it.
All right, so in the last 5 minutes that we have, I would love to know what's next for you all and how can people find or support your work. So what's next for you and how people can find or support your work. Oh, okay. I don't know if you were talking or not.
I'm Maroon Horizon, the color, and then the sky phenomenon. Like on Instagram, my website, Maroon Horizon. I am working on a film called Inner Wound Reel about 3 BIPOC people and their experiences of self-injury, and then finding other ways to cope. So that's what I'm working on, and yeah, find me.
Working on some like healing practices. This is like my own personal stuff, but it's for work. So I'm trying to like collect home remedies that help with colds and insomnia and all this stuff that happens to us. So follow us on social media, Milwaukee LGBT Community Center.
Work-wise, supporting and holding space, caring in whatever way I can for the trans community in Milwaukee, the trans women in Milwaukee, the Black and brown people who are queer in Milwaukee. You can get that work or see that work on our Instagram for Diverse and Resilient. And yeah, I think that's it. I think I answered all of it.
For me, just continuing to work and make art. We were working on a documentary on the Two-Spirit experience in powwow culture and kind of talking about, kind of the experiences of like there's contest powwows and stuff where trans powwow dancers weren't allowed to get judged or scored, and kind of just reminding folks on, that these are identities that existed prior to colonization. And then just working on some other mixed media projects and some trying to get back into that full-time artist life.
All right, thank you. And I also wanted just to let you all know, in case you haven't been following the comments, you all have been getting so much love. Shout out to Cammie, Renelle, Rodney, hey, what's up? And thank you to you all. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Yonsei, Ryan, and Sandra. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you too.
Nice meeting you all.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF